It's a stupid thing to say, and it shows, if anything, a level of desperation on the Prime Minister's part. Labor's history in government is one of welcoming people from other parts of the world. We were the party in government when Helen Clark was Prime Minister, for example, when the Tempe refugees were being issued by the Australian government. Helen Clark stepped in and said, we will help, we will assist, and we took Tempe refugees here. You go back even further in history, it's Labour governments that have opened the doors to people in need from overseas, and under my leadership, we're the party that has said we need to double our refugee quota because we need to be putting out the hand of friendship to those in desperate need around the world. We're a country built on immigration. We always will be dependent on immigration to meet the full kind of range of skills and needs that we have. What we have said is that with the surge in migration that we've had in the last 2 or 3 years, there are some mismatches opening up in terms of the skills that are coming in and the skills that we need, and we do need to manage that more carefully. But that's not anti-immigrant, that's about actually making sure the promise to those who come here, who want to make their life here, is one that we can fulfil. And we can't do that if we're saying we'll take any number any time and we have overcrowded cities, we can't provide the jobs, we can't provide the support that people need. So I totally reject which I think is a pretty cheap view, to be honest, and a sad level of politics. I think, yes, I think they have reacted because actually a lot of people share our view, and again, it's not an anti-immigrant view, it's about actually making sure we get the needs right. But here's the funny thing, the decision that they've announced actually doesn't address the issue that we've raised, which is a labour market issue.
The work visa issues.
The government's own officials have told them, both from Treasury and the Reserve Bank. We've also had, for example, the head of the ANZ Bank, all saying, there are some issues here, which is about in some areas in the labour market because of immigrants coming in and being recruited into semi-skilled roles, it is having an impact on wages and jobs. But the government's announcement this week doesn't even address that. So it looks, if you want to say cheap politics, actually the government's announcement this week looks like it's giving the appearance of doing something, but actually not fixing the real problem. See, I don't think there is a magic number. What you have to look at from one year to the next is, and working with the private sector and business and employers to say, okay, so what do we anticipate the needs are? Where are the skills shortages? What do we need to be making sure we do? And work it out. You're going to evaluate it from one period to the next. There is no magic number. There will be times when we will need more people, when the economy is taking off. There will be times when the economy slows down, we will say, gee, we're just going to have to slow down our immigration intake as well. But there is no set number. You've got to gauge it from 1 year to the next. No, I'll tell you the reason why. Let's give one example. So we know, for example, that in terms of unemployed in New Zealand, we have roughly 15,500 people who describe themselves as labourers who are out of work in New Zealand. They'll be spread across New Zealand, but the bulk of them will be top half of the North Island. Last year we issued 6,500 work visas to people who describe themselves as labourers. Now that's the kind of mismatch I'm talking about. You could probably have reduced the number of work visas we issued by a good 3,000 or 4,000 and worked harder on getting the unemployed New Zealanders into those roles. But that's just one work category. The same will apply to others. That's why I think it's difficult to say at any one time, right, this is the right number, because that number will change depending on where the need is. Right now we know we have a building boom going on. We are having difficulty getting the right skilled labour in to do that work. So we may justify increasing the number of skilled carpenters coming in to be able to do that work. We just have to work with industry from one period to the next to get the number right. They are being, and I think it's pretty cruel actually, they are a government that's given up on getting young New Zealanders who are out of work at the moment into work. So we had Bill English earlier this year describe them as pretty damn hopeless. You've had John Key now on 2 occasions, including just in the last couple of weeks, describing them as on drugs and not working. My view is that for young people in particular, those people 18 to kind of 23-year-olds, they've got their whole working life ahead of them. If they're not in work now or in training or getting an apprenticeship or whatever, We actually ought to be working harder to get them there, because I don't want them to be, permanently on a benefit, the longer they go on, because that's just a big cost to all of us. My view strongly is, okay, so they might be out of work now, and some of them might need a bit extra motivation. They might need a size 11 boot up the backside to get them there. But I'd rather be making that effort, getting them into jobs now, because they've got 30, 40 years of their working life ahead of them, and I want them to be contributing. I mean, that is, I can't say to you anything other than I think it is an embarrassment that a big leading party, we don't have ethnic representation in our caucus. It's not how it was. We were the first party to have an Indian MP in the form of Rajan Prasad, the first party to have a Chinese MP in the form of Roman Ho. And we don't have them now, and that's because, frankly, we had one of the worst results we ever had in 2014. I've made it a personal commitment of mine that after 2017, the Labour Caucus will have ethnic representation. We will have an Indian MP, we will have a Chinese MP. Maybe we'll have more than just those two, I don't know. But I am determined that we have a caucus that is as reflective and representative of New Zealand as it possibly can be, and at the moment we fall short. There's two things we know. We get the stories all the time of newly arrived immigrants. They get work, and they find that they're in a very exploitative situation, and often reluctant to do anything about it because they're fearful. They're fearful of putting their visa at risk, fearful of upsetting others in their community. So they sort of put up with it. But we've seen some horrendous stories, cases that have actually gone to court where migrant workers have been paid way under the minimum wage. They've had their passports withheld, all that sort of stuff. So we've got to make sure that the level of oversight and support that we provide migrant workers is better than what it is. More recently, we've seen the situation with students. You're now under a student visa, you're allowed to work for a period of time, 20 hours work a week. We've seen students coming here on their student visa, and it turns out then that the paperwork that's been done back in their home country, there's been fraud, there's been mismanagement, whatever, and they're being told, well, you're here on a visa that's been obtained in these fraudulent circumstances, you're going to go back. For some of them, they're at the very end of their course of learning, and they're being told effectively they're the ones responsible. And I'm saying, well, gee, they're not the only ones. And in fact, I haven't spoken to many of them. They've told me the stories, and they're not the ones responsible. It's agents back in the home country. It's the institutions here who have recruited them through agents. None of them are ever held responsible, and that's what we have to do. So I think there's more that the government can do to make sure that the students who we're recruiting here under student visas aren't exploited in the way they clearly are now.
Do you mean to say that?
Yes, they open the doors. They open the doors, and they've added this provision where students can work 20 hours a week, and they knew that was going to mean huge amount more interest, at least for students to come to study in New Zealand for that. They've been told by their officials what the risks are around it. They were told by their officials early this year. There were real doubts about the integrity of some of the documentation that is accompanying these students. They've known this, but this government has wanted to say, look, we're a champion of export education. It's a huge revenue earner, big foreign exchange earner for us. We've got these largely private education establishments who are saying they've got businesses built around it. They've turned a blind eye to it. They know this is going on, but they've turned a blind eye and refused to do anything about it, and that's wrong. Yes, and in fact we already have. That's why it was a month or so ago I met many of the students affected by the allegations of fraud and so on. We put the call out and we said, you can't just hold the students liable here. Let them, give them an amnesty, let them finish their courses. But two things the government must do: tighten up their own oversight of the agents back in the students' home countries, and put the onus back on the institutions here who are getting the benefit of those students and their fees, and tell them if they have a student whose documentation is obtained by fraud, the institution must give the student a refund before they go home. And you see how quickly those institutions actually step up and make sure that the documentation is proper and has integrity. We will take action to make sure that the students, when they come here, the agents who are processing their documentation, what I'd like to see is a registration process where we actually vet the agents. So we start to, we do our best to weed out the worst of them, but also put the onus back on the institutions and say to them, if you want to recruit students from overseas, all well and good, but if something goes wrong, we're going to come to you and you've got to sort it out, and you've got to use your oversight and your relationships and your pressure to make sure the students you're recruiting are here for bona fides purposes. We know that, and you've only got to look at the cases that have gone public, the cases that have gone to the Employment Relations Authority. Many of them are ethnic business owners exploiting their own, and that's wrong too. But I think the best we can do there is to make sure that our authorities, our Labour Inspectorate, is resourced and geared up enough to deal with exploitation wherever it is and whoever is doing it. We also have a proposal in relation to the whole labour market and employment relations field, that if you're an employer that has repeated sort of transgressions against our employment laws, not paying the correct wages, making unlawful deductions, mistreating people, after a certain number, we have to put a level of inspection and oversight into your business, because we can't and we don't want businesses that think the only way they can make a profit and succeed is by exploiting other people. So that's what we're looking at for our employment relations area. Yeah, I want to go that far. I think the main thing is that we want managers and business owners who maybe not used to our laws and our values to have somebody alongside them saying, okay, you're going to run your business, we want you to run well, you need to make a profit, of course you do, but you can't do that by exploiting workers. So we will train you on how to actually do workforce management properly and in accordance with New Zealand laws. And we want people from, come overseas, make a commitment here, who want to invest here, have a business here. Great, excellent, we want that. But we as a country have always expected minimum standards to apply, basic standards of treatment, fair treatment for people, and that's got to be the way we go ahead. So that's why, yesterday I announced our commitment in our first term, so over a 3-year period, to lift frontline police numbers by 1,000. The ratio of police to population has deteriorated quite a bit just in the last 8 years. It was roughly 1 to 488 in 2008. Today it's 1 to 528. The proposal I announced gets us to about 1 to 500, which over the long run is roughly where we have been. And that also means, the benefit of that is that we can start to go back to making sure that there are frontline police officers in the community. One of the biggest complaints I get, particularly from small business owners, is in the suburbs, in some of the bigger cities, they say, listen, we used to have a police station, down the road or around the corner, and just their mere presence there and the fact that the police officers would walk up and down every now and again meant that we didn't have the kind of the burglaries and the robberies that we're having now. That's the stuff that makes a difference. Just a sheer police presence can act as a deterrent. So that's what I want us to see getting back to, is that we have enough police numbers where we can maintain that physical presence again and give business owners the sense that actually the streets are secure and safe for them, and they should be able to run their businesses with a level of confidence that they're not going to be attacked by people coming and trying to rip them off. A bit like the Labour Caucus, actually, you want a police force that is as reflective and representative of the population they're policing as you can. And I know from dealing with some of the police officers in Auckland, the ethnic police officers and the communities, just what a huge difference that makes. When ethnic communities see police officers who come from their communities and their countries, it just gives them a sense that, gee, I can communicate, I'm at ease talking and giving information in a way you don't necessarily with a Pakeha police officer. So I think that's important. I congratulated the police yesterday actually on the fact they have a growing level of diversity in their ranks, and I'm definitely keen to see that continue. The good thing about it is the New Zealand Police Force has a good reputation. As they're not seen just when people are in trouble. They're actually seen as helpers and as protectors, and we want that culture to continue. And that is best achieved when you have as diverse a police force as possible. That's why that's why I think next year is going to be so important, because we'll be saying there is a choice here. We know that things like there's a freeze on school funding. There's a 4-year freeze on police numbers. health budget has been cut in real terms, all this, and that's kind of fine. But now we're seeing a $1.8 billion 6-month surplus. The price we're paying for that is that all these other services are being underfunded. And the price we pay for that, particularly things like schools and health, is that those are the things that give people opportunity. And if we run down our schools, have inferior education, and we're already seeing our international rankings going backwards, that means we end up producing a generation who find it harder to get work, to get tertiary education and so on. So I'm saying the choice we've got is we invest in people, or we can, can have these surpluses and, we can have massive tax cuts. But I would rather, and my preference and what I'll be strongly advocating for is we need to reinstate some of the investment that we haven't been doing for the last few years back into people, creating opportunity, giving people a chance. Because the thing that New Zealand is known for is we do give people a chance, and that not everybody takes it, and yeah, we can be criticised people for that, but we've been very good at kind of levelling the playing field through education, through good health, and giving people a chance to get ahead in life and stand on their own 2 feet. And I think the more we can do to celebrate those ethnic communities and their special occasions, their special celebrations, that's what I lived in Auckland myself 20 years ago. I didn't even know of Diwali then. I didn't know of the various kind of celebrations that are now just routine. And you go to them now, and thousands of people turn up. And not just local communities, but all the Pākehā folks as well. We take, and this is where the local councils can help, and maybe the government as well. Let's encourage those celebrations, those expressions of those cultures, so that we all learn and respect and appreciate, because that's actually what builds cities and communities and strengthens communities, and I'm very keen to see more of that. So, and I know Leanne Dalzell. I mean, you hear Leanne Dalzell singing a Chinese love song. It is absolutely inspirational, and so I know she's totally committed to that, and I think other mayors need to be as well. And I think it is well within it. It's an appropriate thing for the council to do, to support, and to reach out to communities and integrate and make them feel welcome. And bringing communities together isn't about eroding or diluting the things that are important to different ethnicities. It's about understanding and celebrating and knowing and making that part of our rich culture as well.